global union is, as it says, it's a trade union that operates at global level, and it is national unions that are our members. So a national union has workers who are members, their members in the factories. Our global union, those national unions join us so that we can work at a global level in the garment industry, and we also cover a lot of other industries as well, like mining and automotive, aerospace, electronics, lots of industries, but we have a very strong focus of our work on the garment industry.
So what is the living wage and how it should be determined?
Okay, so a lot of our work in the garment industry is focused on wages because, as we know, wages are very low, not only in the Myanmar garment industry, but in other countries as well, like Bangladesh, like Cambodia. And part of the reason for that is because of the global companies that are buying the clothes from these countries are paying a very low price. And I can talk a little bit later on about why that is and how we can change it. But what it means for workers is that the wages that they receive are lower than they should be. So we talk about the need for workers to be paid a living wage. Now, a living wage means enough money to be able to support themselves and their families, which means be able to pay for food, be able to pay for housing, education, healthcare, and also have a bit of extra money to spend on fun and presents and holidays and the sorts of things that people want to do to enjoy their lives.
So looking at Myanmar, what are the industry bargaining as compared to factory CBA?
Okay, so at the moment it's very difficult for workers to do anything to raise their own wages. A lot of times wages only go up when there is an increase in the minimum wage, which is the wage that is fixed by the government. So the government will say, yes, it's time for wages to increase, and they will go up. Sometimes workers also manage to negotiate in their own factories with the factory managers to say, we want to get more wages in this factory. And that's good, but it requires a lot of hard work, it requires a lot of training, and it requires a lot of negotiation. And also it's difficult because the factory owner will say, but I can't pay you anymore because I'm not receiving any more money for my orders. It's very difficult for me to pay you anymore. So we think that wages are best changed, best set at industry level, which means all of the factories paying the same wage, which is above the minimum wage. And that is a matter of negotiation between all of the factories and all of the unions. So that we, instead of having individual negotiations at factory level, we would have negotiations across the whole industry, which means that wages will go up for everybody. So some factory owners won't be paying more than others because that would make life very difficult for them, because they would find it hard to compete for orders if they had to pay workers more than other factories were paying, because those factories would be able to offer a better deal to the buyers. So we need a solution that is the same for everybody, and we think that all workers should have the same wages for doing the same work. So if you're working in a factory that is working for H&M, you shouldn't be paid any more than if you're working in a factory that produces for the local market or for a different brand. That shouldn't be a factor. The only factor should be that you get paid a living wage for the work that you do. So we think that industry negotiations for the entire industry is going to be better for everybody. It's going to set what we call a level playing field, as I've explained, so that all of the factories are paying the same wages. And it's also going to mean that instead of having to have lots of separate negotiations, everyone can negotiate together, and you can end up with an agreement that is good for everybody. And such an agreement doesn't just have to cover wages. You can cover other sorts of working conditions so that you create this same platform for industry that is suitable for workers and it's suitable for employers. These sorts of things, it shouldn't matter if you're working in one factory or another factory. Things like wages, like the number of hours that you work, what you get paid for your overtime, can be the same. There can still be room for negotiations in your factory over things that concern only your factory, but things that concern all workers and all factories should be done together.
So I've heard about ACT. What is it really about ACT?
Okay, so ACT is an interesting initiative that we're taking with many of the global brands that buy from Myanmar. So we're talking about H&M and Inditex and Chibo and many, many brands, CNA, all important brands that source from Myanmar. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take that industry bargaining and link it to what the brands pay to the factories. So as I said before, if you as a worker go to your factory manager and say, we need higher wages in this factory, and the factory manager says, well, I could agree with you, but I can't pay you anymore because I'm not getting the orders to support that. We need to change that, and the only way to change that is to also bring the brands into the conversation and say, okay, we all have a collective interest in having higher wages in the garment industry in Myanmar. It's obviously important for the workers. It's also important for the employers as well, because we're saying employers shouldn't be trying to pay their workers out of a price that isn't sufficient to do that. The price that is paid by the brands should be sufficient to pay the workers a decent wage. So ACT is an agreement between industrial and the global garment brands that they will support industry-wide collective bargaining with their purchasing practices, so that the way that they do business with the factories doesn't undermine the negotiations that you've had. So this is not only about wages, it's also about working hours. Workers will know very well that if an order comes in late or there's changes at the last minute, suddenly everybody has to stay and work overtime. So we're talking about changing the way brands do business, not only in terms of the price that they pay, but how they place orders, when they place orders, making sure there's predictability and certainty and good planning. All of these things need to be improved. And that's what ACT is about. It's about having a system that connects what's going on at the global level in the companies with what's happening in the factories and with workers. Because we think we can't solve the issue of low wages in Myanmar, in the factories, unless we also deal with the way that the brands are doing business in Myanmar.
If wage goes up in Myanmar, will the brand move their orders to other countries?
Well, that's a question that people often ask, because at the moment the garment industry, people think, and it's largely true, that brands have gone around the world looking for places where they can get cheapest deals. But there's a change coming now. There's a limit to how cheap you can make it and not have good working conditions. So it's really important for the brands now to support better wages for workers. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the wages will always go up, even without the ACT system and industry bargaining. Wages go up through minimum wage increases. And of course, countries feel hesitant about putting wages up in case the brands do what they've done in the past, which is move orders. What we've seen recently is that that is not happening so much. There are certainly, I'm not saying that all global brands are supportive of this. There are certainly some that are not, but some of the major brands, the huge international brands, don't believe in this model anymore. There are other factors also at play. They want to invest in a country where they can have a stable, predictable, good quality garment industry, and that's what they foresee for Myanmar. There are other ways of competing, not only on price. You can compete on quality, making sure everything's good quality. You can compete on efficiency, making sure that you've got high standards in the factories. These are all important things. So what's good about ACT is that this system is bringing the commitment of brands to a country. So they are saying, if you in Myanmar, for example, in this case, decide to become part of this program and to set up industry bargaining, we commit to staying in Myanmar and supporting the development of the industry. And this is very, very important, because that predictability and certainty is one of the things that is really lacking in the industry. Governments need it, employers need it, workers need it as well. Trade unions need it, because we want to know there will be jobs for workers. We don't want an industry that where factories close down and orders shift from country to country. It's not good for workers. So it's in everybody's interests to create a more stable industry, and having higher wages is a contribution to that, because when you pay workers better wages, you get people staying in a factory longer instead of shifting from factory to factory looking for a better wage. which means that you can train them, they can get experience, and that in turn contributes to better efficiency and productivity. So higher wages are not only good in terms of making sure people get better pay, they're also good in terms of creating that stability, increased efficiency and productivity, better skill levels. It's a win-win-win situation.